She was just a girl, an orphaned immigrant, stripped of her identity, living in exile in a foreign land. She had no army, no title, no power. And yet, when death knocked on her people's door, she didn't just answer. She rewrote the ending. This is the story of how a beautiful, determined queen, Esther, outwitted the most powerful empire of her time, exposed a deadly conspiracy, saved an entire nation from extinction. And she did it with nothing but courage, faith, and a crown. Long before she was queen, Esther was Hadassah, a young Jewish girl born in exile in Persia. Her parents died when she was just a child, and she was raised by her older cousin Mordecai, a wise man who taught her about her people, their God, and their long history of survival. But in Persia, being a Jew wasn't just unpopular, it was dangerous. So Mordecai instructed Esther to hide her Jewish identity, even as he raised her with bold faith and quiet strength. Then everything changed. The great Persian king Xerxes, after banishing his first queen, Vashti, ordered that the most beautiful women across the empire be brought to his palace. Esther was among them. But this wasn't a beauty pageant. It was an empire-wide abduction. Girls were taken from their homes, paraded before the king, and discarded if they failed to please him. Esther had no choice. But in the palace, she gained the favor of everyone who saw her. The scriptures say, Esther obtained grace and favor in the sight of all who saw her. Esther chapter 2, verse 15. And then, against all odds, she was crowned Queen of Persia. Now, behind the marble walls of the Persian palace, Esther held a crown, but she remained silent about who she really was. Meanwhile, outside the palace, a storm was brewing. Entered Haman, a ruthless advisor to the king, arrogant and power-hungry. When Mordecai refused to bow to him, Haman's ego burned with rage. But he didn't just want Mordecai punished. He wanted all Jews in the empire exterminated. So he tricked King Xerxes into signing a decree. On the 13th day of the 12th month, all Jews, young and old, men and women, are to be killed and their property plundered. A death sentence, written in law, irrevocable. Imagine the terror. Hundreds of thousands of people condemned, and the queen was one of them, but no one knew. When Mordecai learned of the decree, he tore his clothes and sat in ashes. Through messengers, he begged Esther, "You must go to the king and plead for your people." But there was a problem. Anyone who approached the king without being summoned could be killed, even the queen. Esther was terrified. Her heart raced. Her hands trembled. She hadn't been called by the king in 30 days. To go uninvited was to walk into death. She could pretend to be safe, stay silent, but Mordecai's words pierced through her fear. Do not think that you will escape, and who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. Esther chapter 4, verse 14. Esther took a breath and replied, "If I perish, I perish." But before going to the king, she did something even more powerful than speaking. She called for a 3-day fast. No food, no water, no distractions. She invited all Jews in the city to fast with her, a spiritual strategy before a political battle. Esther didn't march into the king's presence with rage or panic. She entered in elegance, silence, and strategy. Dressed in her royal robes, She approached the throne, each step heavy with the weight of her people's lives. And then the king held out his golden scepter. She was spared. But instead of blurting out the plot against her people, Esther invited the king and Haman to a banquet, then another banquet. Why the delay? Because Esther knew timing was everything. She wasn't just beautiful, she was wise, strategic, a master of patience. While Esther prepared her trap, Haman built a gallows to hang Mordecai. But that same night, the king couldn't sleep. And in a twist only God could orchestrate, he asked for the royal records, where he was reminded that Mordecai had once saved his life. Haman was summoned not to kill Mordecai, but to honor him publicly. The reversal had begun. At the second banquet, the stage was set. The wine flowed. The king smiled. And then Esther stood. With trembling courage, she revealed the truth. I am a Jew, and my people are about to be destroyed. The king was stunned. Who would do such a thing? He asked. Esther turned slowly to Haman. That vile man, that enemy, is Haman. The room erupted. Haman begged for his life, but it was too late. He was hanged on the very gallows he had built for Mordecai. But the decree still stood. The law to kill the Jews could not be revoked. So Esther and Mordecai issued a new decree. The Jews were allowed to defend themselves. And when the day of destruction came, the hunted became warriors. The Jews fought back and triumphed. They lived because one woman refused to stay silent. Esther's story didn't end with survival. It gave birth to Purim, a celebration of divine deliverance. To this day, Jews remember how God turned mourning into joy and fasting into feasting. But perhaps the greatest legacy Esther left was not just in saving her people, but in reminding all of us that you don't need to be loud to be powerful. You don't need to be born into royalty to carry a crown. And even when your identity feels hidden, your purpose is never lost. Esther didn't fight with weapons. She fought with wisdom. She didn't rule with dominance. She ruled with discernment. And she didn't wait to be safe before she acted blanks. She acted so others could be safe. If Queen Esther's story stirred your heart, imagine how many others need to hear it. Like this video if you found it powerful. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story of hidden heroes in the Bible, and share your thoughts in the comments. What part of Esther's story moved you the most? And remember, you were born for such a time as this.